Mirror's Edge Catalyst has an expansive lore that is being paid little attention to. You might have heard about different events that the characters mentioned in the game. Probably you have even read the prequel comic book called Exordium. Well, I'm glad that there are still people out there interested in the game lore. I tried to make a thorough analysis and deep research of events, notions, and things that are either briefly brought up or they just exist in the drafts and materials not included into the game. And I am planning to make a video series devoted to the fascinating lore of our beloved Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Let's start off with the history of formation of the known world. The very first event in the timeline of the Mirror's Edge Catalyst universe that was mentioned in the game is the Regression, a period between the end of horrific wars that supposedly ravaged the world and the rise of the Amistad, a fictional government inspired by the communist ideals. Unfortunately, it is little told about what led to the regression, but we still have some clues. In the document The Amistad Years, there is a reference to the old wars that destroyed the Greylands. Someone on Reddit proposed a hypothesis according to which the regression happened due to a nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the United States. Quite plausible and credible, I have to say. A link to the Reddit post will be in the description below. I personally would rather agree with this, but in my opinion it's not based on what-if events that would take place in the past of our real world. There is no mention of a definite period in time that the regression lasted for, but I am inclined to believe it took a few hundred years before the rise of the Amistad. Before the Amistad, the population on the continent was scattered and more likely divided into groups. It might be small, self-proclaimed states fighting for the resources and for the land. Devastating wars and climate changes along with a high level of contamination killed off most of the vegetation and mutated the plants. This eventually caused the local conflicts that only made the situation worse. I should also note that it makes sense to call the Greylands anything that was not a territorial unit with its own government. It's just my conjecture, but I think it makes sense. There is no particular Greyland that we see either in the game or in the comic book, yet the way the authors refer to the Greylands as to something that is not a city just confirms my guess. But let's get back to the regression era. Amistad rose out of the regression in dire need of equality, of a classless society in which everyone would profit equally. I believe there were two major reasons for this to happen. In the preceding political system before or during the regression, there were rich and poor, and most of the population belonged to the second group. The gap between them was growing, and the government didn't do anything about it. Since resources were limited, it was essential to constrain the consumption. Each must have a sufficient amount of food and water without abundance. It could be only achieved if there was no classification system. Ultimately, the Amistad seized power in all the settlements he could reach. Some accepted their way of life, others resisted. Among the latter was Kruger family, who was likely to have the authority even before the regression. They maintained their position in the Amistad's party, gathered around them other families who also didn't accept Amistad's philosophy, and revolted. This revolution was called the Kruger Uprising. After decades of the Amistad's ruling regime, the fire broke out. People realized they were deceived by the very government they trusted decades ago. The authoritarian attributes represented by the party elite and the secret police made them lose trust in the regime. The widespread famine was another proof of that. And to Kruger's surprise, there were other visions of the ideal life. The revolution turned into the civil war that lasted for years. Eventually, the Amistad split into Cascadia, Sabis, and reduced Amistad. The end of the Civil War was marked with the signing of the Norwegian Concord, an agreement between three of them. The head of Kruger's family, Dieter Kruger, died during this war. One of the innovations that came with the foundation of Cascadia is a new chronology. Henceforward, each year would be designated as financial year. The Cascadia was founded in FY00. City SE31 was renamed to the City of Glass, and the capital was set there. Dieter Kruger wanted to create a society based on democratic principles and free enterprise, but with his demise the family was led by Dieter's son, Gabriel Kruger. He knew of the horrors of the Civil War. He saw a mindless crowd and what it was capable of. Things had changed. Gabriel planned another future for the Cascadia, and other families saw an opportunity to increase their wealth in it. 5 years later, the former Omnistad, unsatisfied with the outcome of the war, attacked both Cascadia and Sabis in hope to regain the lands. Two newborn nations had never been letting their guards down since the signing of the Norwegian Concord, and they were ready for the invasion. The confrontation lasted for 2 years. The conflict was named the Thetriumvirate War. Nonetheless, it was not a full-scale war. It consisted only of border skirmishes and stopped after an alliance of Cascadia and Sabis retaliated. Amnistad retreated, but no peace treaty was signed since. Things cooled down. After the Triumvirate War, 12 families who led Kruger Uprising strengthened their positions and now controlled most of the market. Step by step, flawed from the start, Cascadia became a tyranny. The conglomerate, a management body, was formed to rule the Cascadia. To avoid repeating mistakes of the old Amistad, a fictional, non-functioning system was conceived, according to which a regular employee, through persistent work, could be elevated to a higher caste. 28 years later, in FY33, on a chilly November day, a peaceful political rally held by Martin Condos joined in the bloody riot that had been burning the glass for 3 days. In these riots, Gabriel Kruger lost his son, who at the time was a mere Krugersec officer. These deplorable events instilled in Kruger his old beliefs. The people of Cascadia were a flock of sheep that needed to be controlled in practically every aspect of their life. New legislative proposals toughening the life of employees were passed. The conglomerate seized power.